announced their final close of their £80 million fund. And this is Fund 2. So Eka has been around for a while, and we're going to talk a bit about where they come from and what they're doing. They are backing pre-seed and seed founders, building in the three main sectors of life, which includes access to essential products and services, preventative healthcare, and decarbonization of major supply chains, consumer supply chains specifically. Camilla, what originally drew you to build a fund with impact at its core?
Hi Andres, great to be here today. Really happy to sort of unpack a bit more around Eka. So three really sort of core reasons. So one was around the commercial opportunity. When we looked at the sort of impact space, we were like, this is just an enormous opportunity, like two of the biggest areas, healthcare, 10% of global GDP, $12 trillion of spend this year going into healthcare. That's up, from 8 trillion 10 years ago. So like crazy growth rate. And then the same with the decarbonisation of our major supply chains, trillions and trillions of dollars going into improving sort of decarbonisation and resiliency of supply chains. And then life essential products and services is what you and I sort of interact with every day. So insurance, education, sort of financial services, and those are also sort of $1 trillion opportunities. So when we think about impact, we think about the services and the products that you use on your daily life. And at Eka, we want to be the fund that backs the companies, that builds the companies that you use every day. Part of that thesis was also the sort of economic drivers. We really think about impact as being a driver of value. Why, I guess, is the sort of follow-on to that. So talent is one of them. When we looked at our sort of early investing, we were seeing that the impact-led companies were the ones that were just attracting the most exceptional talent and retaining that talent. And we would call them missionaries rather than mercenaries. They were there because they really believed in the mission and they wanted to build the economy they wanted to be part of. The second is customers. So, most customers are trying to improve their health, they're trying to access fair and reasonable financial services, and they're trying to be more sustainable in small ways sort of through their life. I think Vinted is like an incredible example of that, a business that's totally changed the sort of sustainability hallmarks of fashion, whilst also keeping abundance and joy in how the consumer interacts with it. The third is sort of funding. So we felt that there would be an opportunity where there would be huge swathes of capital that were unlocked by having this sort of focus on impact, and we've definitely seen that in some of the companies in Fund 1, which we're really happy to chat a bit about. And then the fourth and final one is regulation. So most of these sectors are quite heavily regulated, and we felt there would be a real sort of opportunity for companies that lent into that regulation, took their responsibility seriously and recognised that they were building that sort of core infrastructure that people use every day. The second sort of mega theme around sort of why is actually the technology finally exists. So, we started in e-commerce. A lot of the sort of tools and techniques that some of the best e-commerce companies were using weren't really at a level of safety where they could be used in healthcare. That has like really radically changed over the last 5 years. We've got companies in the portfolio like Flok Health, which I think is just such an amazing example of this. So CQC, so that's a regulation to be like a regulated as a healthcare service provider. So CQC regulated, software as a medical device regulated, they're actually delivering AI delivered care. In the UK, you wait 12 weeks to go and see someone for lower back pain care. Flok can bring that down to 0 and they can do it safely and in a regulated manner. That just wasn't possible a few years ago. About 10% of global GDP, about 80% of that sits in sort of treatment, and AI and sort of better sort of pharmaceutical products is going to change a lot of that spend. So just massive opportunity, and we think that's because the technology is now at a maturity level, and then there's just a huge white space opportunity. So we have a very specific lens on impact. We're particularly excited about consumer models. We define consumer as companies that have a positive benefit on an end consumer, whether the distribution is direct to consumer or B2B2C, and that's a huge white space. Most impact investors are focused on the B2B end of the market, and we've really experienced that in Fund 1. So 70% of portfolio companies, when we issued a term sheet, there was no competing term sheet, even though 70% of those have gone on to raise really like excellent up rounds from funds like Index and Excel. And then I guess really finally, like, we love it. We've got one life. I think John, my business partner, and I were like, if we're going to dedicate it to anything, what better thing to dedicate it to than this?
Yeah. Camilla, I have to ask you, because a lot has happened in impact investing since you raised Fund 1. In some cases, like obviously technologically in the market, but especially in the narrative. So I'd love to hear how how you reflect on what has happened since you announced Fund One, which I guess is some 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I know we were talking about it briefly. I think some of the narrative is a branding thing. So, impact defined as the way we define it, so health, sustainability, life essential products and services. Those are the topics that are on the front page of the news every single day. Like, everybody knows the healthcare system needs to change, the energy system needs greater resilience, and we need sort of fairer financial services and education. So I think those are areas that people are continuing to invest into, but then there's this sort of branding question around like impact, it's like a sort of dirty word. And so I think sort of the impact, those themes remain as relevant as ever, but I agree with you that there's some negativities around the label of impact at times, particularly in the US. That isn't what we're experiencing within the actual sort of landscape itself. So, Deal Room sort of published some data last year that said like 10 impact unicorns were sort of minted, including like Fuse Energy in the UK, one of the fastest sort of growing companies in the UK. When we sort of started, the value of sort of impact startups was relatively small, so 3.6 trillion now, 28x up from 10 years ago, and there's lots and lots more investors in the space. I think one of the most exciting things about the impact community is that it is a community. So when I started in VC in 2013, it was a relatively sort of small community, extremely collaborative, and everybody was sort of building towards something and trying to build that ecosystem. That's how the impact community feels like today, and we're seeing a lot of really fantastic funds raise follow-on capital.
Don't you also think, Camilla, and this I am saying, I'm definitely not putting those words in your mouth, don't you think that we have a very loud minority with some quite heavy bro culture like framings of things that in the venture community, tech community, we all hear them all the time, they have their own podcasts and that type of thing, but they're really like, if you get to talk to founders or if you get to talk to the common man right next door to you, they don't think about it in those terms at all.
As in, they don't think about the bro culture at all.
Yes, I think we have an echo chamber in venture that's driven by a select group of individuals that are very powerful when it comes to creating narratives, and they've done that successfully in our industry, but it's not really something that's going on in the wider society. At least that's how I feel it when I go around.
No, I mean, I think there's loads of different ways that you can be a venture investor and be an extremely good venture investor. I think what we really believe, and I think some of the cohorts of impact investors that we really admire in the space, is people like Norsken and Pale Blue Dot. I think we really believe there is an opportunity to build businesses in this way, and for those businesses to be like mind-blowingly successful and to generate like outlier returns, and that's sort of really what we're focused on. And I think if you come back to that consumer point, like affordability and accessibility is incredibly important. And I think this laser focus on thinking about impact through that lens, like helps you to build companies that target that sector and then build into really big businesses. Vinted, I think, is such a great example of that. That's a business that the majority of their user base is a female user base. It's all around sort of female empowerment and changing the way people shop. That's a multi-billion-dollar business, one of the biggest sort of European scale-up companies that's happening at the moment.
Camilla, what themes are you most excited about when you look at life, health, and sustainability? Where are you most excited?
Yeah, definitely. So within, I think John and I have sort of different themes, but the themes I'm really excited about in life is all around safety and security. I think that is a theme that is really still at its nascency, and I think there's lots of different sectors of that. So guardrails for safe use of AI, how we think about identity in this new world, how you secure identity, how you use identity, and then also physical safety. So people are wearing a lot of gadgets and devices, like how do we use those things to make people safer in their day-to-day lives and feel safer in their day-to-day lives. So we've made one investment in that theme in Fund 2, isn't yet announced, but I'd really love to make a lot more. The second thing around health, so we talked earlier about Flok Health and sort of AI and the power of AI. I mean, AI and robotics in healthcare is just going to change the game, and it's really going to change the game in care delivery. And so I'm super excited about companies that are like leaning into that, like how do we actually like deliver care using AI or like AI and robotics. We've made one awesome investment in the robotics space called XR Labs and Fund One, which is helping surgeons sort of visualize and operate their surgery more safely and going into robotics over time. Love to make more investments in that space and go across lots of different categories. And then in sustainability, every industry still has so much opportunity to improve efficiency within their supply chains. One of the investments in Fund One we're really excited about is called Foresight Data Machines. They're decarbonising the steel industry by helping electric arc furnaces more effectively buy and use scrap. We think every single consumer industry has that dynamic to it. Personally would love to do something in the food space. Most food manufacturing still remains incredibly inefficient. 30% of food globally is wasted. So just so much opportunity, like commercially and from a sustainability perspective there. And then very finally, like we've mentioned Vinted a few times, I would love to find the next generation of that. And I think in consumer, things do normally go in trends. So would anticipate that there is a sort of video-based version of that. And would be really excited to sort of back that one as it comes through.
Camilla, one of the things that both you and John are incredibly respected for in the venture community is how you're looking and selecting at founders, because this is something that everyone says. You ask them, how do you invest in a startup? What do you think about? What do you look at? And everyone says the team, but most people are not very good at explaining exactly what they look for, and they're not as methodic as you guys are. I'd love to hear you, Camilla, unpack that a bit.
Yeah, definitely. This is probably one of our areas of highest excitement. And I guess to sort of put that in context about why we spend so much time on it. So we look at 10,000 businesses a year, meet 1,000, make 6 to 8 investments. And really like the determining factor is generally that sort of founder star power. So we look for sort of 4 things. So awareness of strengths and weaknesses, your impact on others, so how do you show up, your sort of focus on learning and obsession with learning and outlier achievement. And those last 2 are really sort of the key 2 for us. So that like maniacal obsession with learning is something we're really focused on. And I guess one of the reasons why is one of the first investments we made was a food box business called Gusto. And I remember from the very earliest stage, so like seed stage, Timo being like, for me to build a very big business, I'm no longer going to be doing, I'm going to be leading, and did like an MBA, then a leadership assessment course, leadership trained to be a coach, and took on a number of board seats. And through that period of time, went from somebody that had never managed before to managing thousands and thousands of people. So when we're sort of looking for sort of founders, that's one of the hallmarks we're really looking for. And the second is just like consistent, crazy outlier achievement. And we think about that in sort of a couple of different dimensions. So one is that they just have this high agency that when they focus on something, they make it happen, and they do that, and they've got evidence of having done that in multiple different situations. Merva, who's the CEO and co-founder of a business called Hived, which is a last mile logistics business, we backed that at pre-seed. She was straight out of university. When we did this sort of 90-minute interview that we do with founders, we found out that she had tier 1 academics, a scholarship. She was the Man City football women's under 17 captain, and she had built like an incredible like influencer strategy for her family's takeaway chain Archie's. So we were like, wow, like this is someone that just makes stuff happen. They make it happen across like a wide variety of different environments.
She's speaking at our summit, by the way.
Oh, amazing. Well, she's more articulate about her journey than I am.
I remember John, he had a catchphrase that really stuck with me, which about founders, which was, if I don't feel anxious going into a meeting with them, they're not the right type of founder for me. And I just thought that was such a, like, you can summarize so many things into that, meaning this person is a true outlier. You know you got to be on your game when you're stepping into that call. You know that anything you ask, they will be evaluating, they will have thought about already. Like, I just thought it was such a, like, if you summarize all the different factors, then what does that make you feel? And I think it's that tingling in your tummy every time you're about to meet them.
Yeah, there's a little bit of anxiousness. You need to be well prepared and be mindful around that conversation.
Camilla, tell me, when you look ahead, what does success look like for Eka?
Yeah, so I think two different things. So one is we want to have top 5% returns to unequivocally prove that impact investing works and catalyze more capital into the space. And then the second is that we want to be the first investor into the infrastructure that consumers run their life on. So when you wake up in the morning, we want you to be using a company or a service that's a company that's backed by Eka. When you go into work, we want you to be using a transport system that's a company that's backed by Eka. When you eat lunch, we hope it's something that the food system has touched, that Eka has been an investor into. And likewise, when you socialize and sort of manage your finances. So that's our key aim, that the companies that Eka backs touch your life every day, and in doing so, make your life healthier and more sustainable.
What a beautiful close. Camilla, congratulations so much. And to any founder out there that's building in life, health, or sustainability, if you're raising, now's the time to talk to Eka.
Thank you for having me, and look forward to seeing you at the summit.